Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. In 1966, Paul Simon wrote a song called Patterns, and the lyric intimated that we are all born with fixed patterns that we cannot change. Is this true? Are there ancestral patterns of emotions, beliefs, and attitudes that are inherited just like DNA? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Judy Wilkins-Smith, says that we may learn to recognize these patterns and change the dynamic, leading to healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives. Judy Wilkins-Smith is a highly regarded organizational, individual, and family patterns expert, systemic coach, trainer, facilitator, thought partner, leadership conference and motivational speaker, and founder of System Dynamics for individuals and organizations. She has 18 years expertise in assisting high-performance individuals, Fortune 500 executives, and their teams, as well as legacy families, to break limiting cycles and reframe challenges into lasting breakthroughs and peak performance. Her website is judywilkins-smith.com, and she joins me this week to share her experience and methods. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus, Judy Wilkins-Smith. Good evening, Judy.
Hi, Victor. It's nice to be here with you this evening.
And wonderful to have you join us. Judy, please share with our listeners your path and how it led to this wonderful work that you bring to our world.
So for me, I say it was a fortune or a series of fortunate happenstances. It was a little bit like being shepherded into what I was going to be doing because my background is a medical background. But when I moved over to the US, I started writing books. And during research for one of those books, I met with somebody who said, "You need to come and study this work and I'll help you write the book." So I went and studied the work and got absolutely no help with the book. But it launched a career that I didn't see coming. Now, the interesting piece with that is that about a good way into it, somebody said to me, "Well, of course you'll do this work." And I said, "Why, of course?" And they said, "Its origins are South Africa with the Zulu tribe. So you're from South Africa." And I did not know that. But even more profound was the fact that, yes, it's based on the Zulu tribe. And when I worked in the Department of Surgery, when I left, they gave me a farewell. And one of my seniors there said to me, and he was a Zulu gentleman, "You may be leaving us, but you'll find a way to represent us in the world." And I laughed and I said, yeah. And I do that every day.
Absolutely. I recently learned of the philosophy, the Zulu and South African philosophy of Ubuntu, about unity.
Exactly. And as we'd spoken about it before, I am because we are. In my work, it's I am because you were. And so, yes, Ubuntu is very important to us. If you grow up in Africa at all, you know that word. It is in fact, you'll often see them put their hand over their heart when you speak the word.
And literally, it means that we are individually responsible for each other and for everyone. In fact, when they name a baby in a village, they raise the baby in front of the entire village and say, "Whose child is this?" And everyone responds, "Our child."
Exactly.
What a wonderful custom, and something that our entire world could learn a lesson from.
Oh, yeah.
In 1966, Paul Simon wrote a song called Patterns. And the lyrics said, in part, "From the moment of my birth to the instant of my death, there are patterns I must follow, just as I must breathe each breath. Like a rat in a maze, the path before me lies, and the pattern never alters until the rat dies." Was he sharing a truth or just having a really bad day?
Actually, He was probably having a bad day, but he was sharing a perception. And often we think that we're stuck in a pattern, that we're going to just be a part of, exactly as he said, until we die. We're like a rat on a treadmill, and it's not true. In fact, exactly the opposite is true. We have these patterns that echo through us from our ancestors precisely because they're waiting for us to write a different chapter and turn them into the gold that they were meant to be. Every struggle contains gold. And when we discover that, we discover our purpose and the gift and the gem.
In the discussion of patterns in the work that you do, there are a few terms that we have to define so that others will understand. So the first word let's define in your terminology is dynamic.
Okay, so dynamic, plain and simple, is another word for pattern, a system pattern. Is there a pattern of poverty? Is there a pattern of abundance? Is there a pattern of fear? Where did that start? How did that come into being? What set that pattern in motion? So that's a dynamic.
And then, as you said, the next word is system. What is a system?
So systems are the units of which we are a part. In a family system, it's brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, all the way back. In an organization, this can differ. It can be vendors, it can be consultants, it could be the associates. There are a number of parts that form that system. So it's everything that belongs in and defines that unit.
And the next word in your lexicon is constellation. What does that mean?
A constellation is that very beautiful 3D mapping component of this work. In other words, it makes literally the invisible visible and the unconscious conscious. By dimensionally mapping, in other words, by setting out an issue or a system in 3D, you can, instead of thinking about it in your head or trying to solve an issue in your head, you can literally walk in it, taste it, touch it, feel it, interact with it. And what you're doing is you're activating multiple senses, which in turn gives very different insights and the ability to feel the system very accurately and use it to shift from where you are to where you want to be. So you're playing in 3D when you're doing a constellation.
And this is almost in the context of your work, like an organizational chart or a heraldry chart, isn't it?
It really is. It's like an org chart in action. It's definitely a genealogy type thing, except that in genealogy, we know where you belong, and this work shows you how that matters.
Applying this on a personal level, you share that in addition to our biological DNA, we have emotional DNA. What is it? Where does it come from? And how does it manifest in our lives?
So emotional DNA, what I call emotional DNA, is the patterns of thoughts, feelings, and actions that run your life, and they run your life. What most of us don't realize is they're often multi-generational. We're not just an angry person. My father was angry, my grandfather was angry, my great-grandfather was angry, but what made who angry, and why are we all still loyal to that pattern? And what is it asking to become through me?
Now, let's just say that for some reason there was a disconnect and you really don't know your birth family. Could you still have the emotional DNA?
Absolutely, you could. And we see this often. In fact, if you look at some of the programs where a mother and child have been separated or twins have been separated and they come back together, you find the similarities and the connections that are there. And the ways that we carry that are in our thoughts, our words, our feelings, our actions, the quirky sense of humor we have. Where did that come from? The deep desires we have that aren't in harmony with perhaps the adopted family or the family that isn't a family of origin. Where did that come from? We have that very beautifully codified into our systems and wired into our brain, and we then express that as though it were ours. But very often, the words in your mouth and the actions that you take didn't begin in your mouth, and nor did the actions in your body. They began in the mouths and bodies of our ancestors.
Now, as we discussed offline, this comes under the science of epigenetics. What is epigenetics?
So it actually touches onto two sciences, by the way, neuroscience and then epigenetics. In epigenetics, what we're looking at is an event that creates an impact on a member of the system, and the impact is large enough that it lasts beyond the original member impacted. So if you had a famine, if somebody struggled to put food in their mouth and they had eating issues, you may see that echo through the system. You may see people have eating disorders. Either they may guzzle because they don't know where the next meal is coming from, or they don't know how to take nourishment because their ancestors didn't either.
And is there, in the context of epigenetics and also neuroscience, is there hard scientific evidence to prove this?
It is being linked more and more to this. What we're finding, particularly with things like neuroscience, is that your brain is not hardwired, period, done. It is the different events that have this wired in. We're speaking the same sentences as our mothers did, whose mothers did. And that creates our reality. But the minute we notice what we're doing and we begin to think one new thought, feel one new feeling, take one new action, now literally your predictable future is no longer predictable. You've just changed it. And if you keep working with that, you will rewire the brain.
Let's say that somewhere in the past, in my family, there was someone who had a tremendous sense of fear of loss, that they would lose everything that they would acquire. How would that pass down and manifest?
Oh, that's beautiful, because what happens is they have a fear based on something. Either they lost something or they almost lost something. So the fear is something terrible could happen. I could lose it all. I can't take loss. So what do? They say to their children, be careful. Don't be careless. Make sure you know where your things are. You could lose everything. Watch out. So now all of this echoes down, and the next thing you know is the child's going, be careful, make sure I've got everything in its right place, because if I don't, I could lose it. If I lose it, this is a disaster. And they pass it to their children. And so it keeps echoing through until one of the kids goes, hold on a minute. There's the key rack. My stuff's always in place. This having to be hypervigilant is not working for me. I don't need to be so fearful of what I'll lose. I wonder if I'm not fearful about what I lose, what instead I might find. And so they begin to flip that emotional DNA. And now they're oriented towards finding, not losing. And they're oriented towards coping, not failing.
You call this multi-generational inheritance. Some of it feels right, and some of it perhaps less desirable. Give us another example of how we may shift this DNA and better our lives and those of our children and future generations.
Absolutely. So as we've said, some of it is really, really good, right? If you've got strong success, you want to keep that going. But sometimes we want something different. And that is the system's provocation. It's telling you, hey, this pattern's not working for us anymore. You need to do something different. And it looks like this. You start to get frustrated. You're unhappy. What you've got isn't working for you. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's the system prompting you and telling you, you're too big for this little box. Get out, do something different. So when this happens for you and you're struggling, you want to look at, okay, how am I struggling? Did that begin with me? Where did it start? How is it affecting me now? What would I like to stop? That means you address the pattern that's in place. And the next question is, so what do I really want? What do I really want? How would that feel? What would that do? And the more we invest in that, the more we begin to shift that multi-generational inheritance into, instead of what's inevitable, now what's possible.
Let's apply another example to this. Let's say that generations back, a family was manual laborers, and that's what they knew. And the concept of aspiring to higher education, even university, was something that wasn't even discussed. How might that manifest and how may that be turned around?
So the most beautiful thing is you're going to get a kid who's restless, a kid who looks at the internet or looks at the television or sees somebody go past. You never know what will stimulate it. But the most beautiful thing happens. They want. And the word want is very important because without wanting, we don't move. But the minute we want, we begin to stimulate that frontal cortex and we begin to have a look with creative mind. So if I want that, what do I need to do? What do I need to do differently? And if we invest in the want, it'll take us to a place where we say, this old way doesn't serve me anymore. It's too small, or it just isn't working. I want to do something different. And so now you begin to invest more in the want than the frustration or the need to be small. And the minute that's activated, you're actually on your way to changing the system. So the non-academic sees somebody walk past and they have a nice dress or they seem to have all sorts of good things together and they go, I want that. Well, where did that come from? What does it look like? How do I get it? What do I do? And the more you ask that, the more you migrate in the direction of what do I need to do? I no longer agree to be small. I know that more is possible.
Is much of the negativity patrilineal or matrilineal?
Both. It's
Mm.
both. Yeah. It can and tends to travel gender wise, but not always. But it comes from both. It is more, the origins lie more in the significant events. The significant events and what we made them mean on either side.
One of the key issues with this inherited DNA is our attitude toward money. In what ways does this manifest, and how may we remap and change this pattern?
Beautiful. So we have what we call a money bandwidth, and that's constructed by all of the language that you use as an individual or as a family around money. And it very clearly dictates whether you will or won't, can or can't have it. So, for example, honesty is better than money. You can have money or love, but not both. It's not the truth, but if we make it the truth, then we act as though it was the truth and we follow that set of rules. And so for me, it was, I always said honesty was more important than money because this is what we were taught. And so I went to a casino. I've never forgotten that. And I'd really been wanting more money because we were pretty tight. We needed to have a little bit more come in. And I kept asking for it a little bit like the guy who's sitting on the roof with the floods coming and saying, send a boat. And I had my little amount of money. We went to a casino and I had somebody else's with me. And I put 3 coins in and I hit a jackpot, about $1,000, which was great. It would have helped us. But I realized I'd taken the coins from the other pot. So instead of taking 3 coins and putting them in the other pot, like most people would have done, I was like, oh no, I've got to be honest here. And I gave them the whole pot. So no matter how hard money tried to play with me, I was just finding wonderful ways to reject it because growing up, it was honesty is more important than money. Not, hey, you could be honest, refund the amount, and you're really good to go. Oh, no. I was going to make sure that I was honest to a fault, and I do mean to a fault.
And you say that's because most of us consider money to be a commodity rather than having a relationship with it.
Absolutely. Money is not a commodity. It is absolutely a relationship. And the relationship you have with it is the way that it will show up for you. If you think it's something evil, it's going to be pretty nasty around you. But if you start to make friends with it and talk to it and welcome it and thank it and be aware of it and be a really good student, you find out very quickly that love of money is not the root of all evil. Lust of money, maybe, but love of money is something completely different. It is, I see you as a friend, I will be a wise steward, and I will ask you to partner with me. Let's see what we can do together.
I've coached several people who have basically poverty consciousness. How does one overcome that?
You look at where it came from first. You look at the events or the generations events, and you then have a look at how it impacted, what caused that poverty consciousness, and then you begin to unwind it. So if there is a guilt around it, is it really your guilt to still carry after 3 generations? If there was a loss, do you have to still be true to that loss? If there was a fear, is that really your fear? And so we unwind it and put it back where it belongs. And then often what I will have people say is to the prior generations, for you who couldn't, I can. Watch me as I do it differently.
Mm. So in essence, not only is it healing the current and future generations, it's also healing the past generations.
Absolutely. And it's also changing history, because often what happens is the ones who look like villains, when we see them through a systemic lens, are often hidden heroes.
My guest is Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, please share with our listeners your website and your offerings on your website.
Absolutely. So I'm judywilkins-smith.com, and there you will find blogs, you will find information about this work, you will find a schedule of the events surrounding this work, and it's a really helpful website to go to.
And we'll be back with more of Judy Wilkins-Smith after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes. Co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Dad, I picked up your pills, made your lunch, and your laundry is done.
When you care for a loved one, you take care of everything. But are you taking care of yourself? Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, how may inherited DNA affect our ability to have satisfactory relationships with others, and how may this be addressed?
So again, you want to look at what is the pattern of relationships in the family system. And what we know is we tend to do like those who came before us. So what you may see is something like a woman who comes in and says, I really want a relationship, but I struggle. And I keep leaving. Why do you leave? Because they're stupid. Okay, I had this happen in a workshop. She said, she came in with this person and she said, I'm about to divorce this person. This is husband number 3, and he's stupid, so I have to leave him. And I thought, this is going to go well. The guy's sitting right next to you. So I said to her, well, okay, let's talk about that. And let's have a look at your mom and your grandmother and just map it out and see what that was like. Turns out each of the women had had 3 husbands. When we go back to the original original grandfather, grandmother was a very smart businesswoman. Grandfather lost all the money. And when he did, grandmother said, he is stupid. I cannot tolerate this. He will destroy the family. And she left. And so after that, the women became loyal to, if you see stupid in a man, leave fast. But this poor guy wasn't stupid. It was just that he was doing things very differently to her. But because she had the unconscious loyalty, which we do, to the suffering of others, which we do, she was taking on the same pattern. Just like her grandmother, just like her mother, so it is for me.
And did you coach her and save the marriage?
Here was what happened. She took one look and she went, darn. And she turned around and looked at the guy and said, you almost nearly didn't have a chance, did you? And then she looked at her grandmother and she said, I need to do this differently. Bless me when I can look at a man and know that he's smart in his own right and I can stay.
Wonderful.
So she saved her marriage, but it was by doing that beautiful constellation, the dimensional mapping, that she could see it. Instead of me talking to her or telling her, she could actually see it and go, oh boy, there is a pattern.
On a personal note, one of my challenges has been being wired early on as a caretaker, often at the expense of personal care and occasionally burnout. We have many listeners who are experiencing this same thing right now. What would you offer us?
Okay, so here's what I would say first. You want to have a look at when this began, and likely you know. And where did it begin in generations before you? Because what's happened, and I'm going to explain it. So please, Victor, if I don't get it right, just kind of, and you don't get it, tell me. But so here's what happens. At an early age, you're asked to become too big. In other words, you're asked to step out of your place as a smaller one to take care of something that is bigger than you should be taking care of. You with me?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay, so now you become too big. That means that you are out of place, out of order, if you want, your natural order. Now you're having to stand out of the flow of love, life, success. Now you can't receive the nurturing that you need in order to pass it on to the ones who come after you. And so what you tend to do quite often is you give and you give and you give and you give, but the inner cry or the inner plea is, have I done enough for you to see that I need something too? And of course, people don't always. And so what I've found is caretakers are then also very quiet. But what they will say is, you know, whenever I need somebody to be there for me, there is no one. And the reason is because people are so used to seeing you big. They're so used to you carrying the weight that they go, oh, well, Victor's got it. I don't need to do anything. And so the offering in that is to say this, when you're out of place, where is my place? If you were a second born who had to take care of a firstborn or had to take care of a parent, you could still stand in your place and find from each of the ones who came before you one small thing that you can receive from them, which allows you to restore that flow of life and love and success. It also takes that terrible burden away. Now, bear in mind, there is an upside to this because you learn to be very strong. But the downside is you don't know when to quit. And yes, you can get burned out very quickly. When you start to feel that, you need to know it's time for this pattern to stop. I cannot carry the burden of those who came before me, and I cannot carry their fate. It doesn't belong to me.
In 1970, the Moody Blues, Justin Hayward, who's the lead singer and guitarist, came out with a song called Question. I was 17 at the time, and the song became my personal anthem. And there's a line in there that says, when you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true, that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you. Why is it so easy for so many to give that love and not feel the sense of self-love and worth?
Oh, okay. Another lovely, easy one to answer, because we are raised to believe that it's right to suffer and it's right to give, and it's more blessed to give than to receive. And so we model ourselves on that. And it's actually really, really wrong. And I'll tell you what happened for me that was beautiful, that kind of cured me a little bit. Most of us, or many of us, are geared to give, as you say. And I had a gentleman who was a patient in South Africa, and he's popped past. We'd formed quite a good relationship. And he was an African-American gentleman, or African gentleman rather, from the rural areas where they didn't have many resources. And he came in and he said to me, "I have an orange for you." And my immediate thought was, oh my goodness, he needs the vitamin C. He needs to have this orange. I can't do that. And I said to him, when you take it home, eat it and think of me. And he looked at me, Victor, and he said to me, am I not good enough to belong in your world?
Oh,
And I've never forgotten it. You can hear, I've never forgotten that. And that was when I realized, if I don't know how to receive, I'm telling people, you're not good enough to belong in my world.
that is an amazing and powerful lesson that most of us need to learn.
You know yourself too. And I know I've experienced this. Somebody gives me something, and if I'm overjoyed, it's as though I've given them the gift. They really feel like they belong in my world. They've hit it out the ballpark. They did something amazing. So when we rob people of that, we're actually robbing them of their magic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
And that gentleman doesn't know it, but he travels with me all over the world.
I'm sure he does. Absolutely. That's so beautiful. If it is affecting us, it is likely also affecting others in our family. How do we gently broach the subject with them and share in the remapping?
So here's what happens. I often say to people, yes and no, because what affects you may not affect your brother. What affects you may not affect your sister. Because as individuals, we key into different parts of the system. Something that you say to me may not faze me in the least and take my brother out. But the minute that I start doing my inner work and I start looking at what's affecting me and what the gift is and what I'm supposed to do with it, everybody else starts to notice the difference, because now I'm no longer relating the same way. And I've worked with families where I have somebody come into an event and they say, my family will never do this stuff. And I go, okay. And I have at least 3 or 4 of them where I've seen 15 and 20 members of their family, because the family noticed that something was changing and they wanted to understand, because the change was powerful.
So, in essence, by the example.
By the example, I always say to people, please, when you're at an event, do not go home and verbally vomit this all over your family. They will not appreciate it at all. Just be with it, do what you're doing, and when they notice, they'll ask questions.
The expression nature abhors a vacuum is attributed to Aristotle, and it implies that if we make a space or clear something, natural laws want to replace it with something else. How do we ensure that when we remove or change a detrimental pattern, we don't replace it with another one?
That is the joy of this work. What we do is we look at the pattern, we look at its origins, we look at the effects. And so when you're at an event, I teach a good amount of theory with this, but your entry point is also your exit point. So if somebody struggles with belonging, what I want to make sure of is that by the end of that piece of work, the not belonging has turned to belonging, or the belonging through poverty has converted to belonging by showing abundance. So it's making very sure that you see that the pattern that wants to rest can, and that the pattern that wants to emerge is joyful and helpful.
We've talked about patterns that might be very obvious in certain situations, including poverty, money issues, issues with self-worth and care. Are there patterns that are not so obvious? And if so, how may we find them?
So the interesting thing is we talk broadly about patterns, but every pattern is unique to the individual. And the way that I tell people to go and find them and look for them is to sit down again and say, what bothers me? What troubles me? Where am I not happy in my heart? What would I like to change? Where did this come from? Have I always done this? Have my family done this? What is asking to change through me? And it can be anything. It can be silly little things. I'm trying to think of some of the good ones. Guilt. Somebody who walks in and says, well, I'm just not successful. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. I mean, not everybody's successful, but yeah, but why don't you want to be successful? Well, I do, but I mean, that's at the cost of other people. Hold on. Where did that thought come from? So it's really paying attention to the niggles, the little pieces, but it can be as profound as an illness. It can be just something that you notice that you do and you're going, what am I doing that for? Why? I used to always say when I went out to go and eat at a restaurant, it was an old thing in South Africa, and they'd bring the bill and I'd say, so if I don't have enough money, can I wash the dishes? And one day I thought, what is this? And I was talking to my mom about it and she started to laugh and she said, I know where that comes from. So I said, okay, tell me more. When she and my father got engaged, they were pretty darn poor. They didn't have much, but he took her out for dinner. And he said to the guy there, ha, 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 if I don't have enough money, can I wash the dishes? Reached for his wallet and he'd left it in his room.
Oh.
And I never knew that, but it echoed and echoed. And there was me saying this. I went, no, we're not doing that one. And so for me, it was, I always have enough.
That's fascinating that occurred and that it would manifest that way.
Oh, yeah. And once you start paying attention, you will see how words and sentences and events, may I say, echo through the system, similar events that have happened in different generations that echo through because something wasn't resolved. And so it's going to show up again as a very similar event until it gets seen and remembered and incorporated into the system, because the system doesn't allow for anyone to be excluded.
So in essence, the process is to literally take an inventory of all of these things that are happening in life. The ones that we're happy with, of course, we can acknowledge, and the ones that are not exactly pleasing us or not exactly the way we would like to be living life, those are the ones that we have to take a look at.
That's the one you want to look at and say, okay, whose stuff am I holding on to here? Come on, guys, who does this baggage belong to? Because I'm pretty sure it's not mine.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've personally been addressing for several years and know many people who are doing so is having safe boundaries. And when I say safe boundaries, not allowing others to take advantage of our nature. What can we do about that?
I love that. See, that goes back to your being a caretaker, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Everybody, I have broad shoulders, just pack it on.
That's it.
I have a lovely process that I do with someone like you that shows exactly what you do when you don't have them. So if you were at an event with me and you said, I take care of everybody and my boundaries are not that good, what I would have people do is I would say to you, okay, hold out your arms, and I'd get them to bring their heaviest purses and all of the bits and pieces they could find until you were groaning. And then I would say to you, how's that feel? Oh, this is a lot, but this is what you carry every day. Do you want to do that? Because right now, do you have space to do anything else? Mm-hmm. Well, no, but I am in service. Yes, at what cost? Are you following your heart's desire and really tuning into your highest good, or are you more inclined to be in service of? Because when you're in service of it and those boundaries are leaking, you're enabling people to become crippled and not carry their own fate And it's also not treating their fate or their path with dignity, because you keep taking it away from them.
Well, in the last couple of years, I am proud to say that I learned that the word no is a complete sentence.
Yes. I love it. It's a very honorable word. It also says, no, I will not do this for you because I see that you are perfectly capable.
Absolutely. My guest, Judy Wilkins-Smith, will be back with more of Judy after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and experiences connect through conversation, and it feels good.
This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together. Start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/one small step. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now there are vaccines, and they are the first step that lets us get back to the things we miss most, like spreading the word without spreading concern, girls tripping instead of solo sipping, and talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines. Now, get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, you've shared your wisdom and experience with Fortune 500 business leaders and other major corporations. Is it easier or more difficult to apply this work with them?
Surprisingly easy, actually. I know somebody said to me yesterday, but you know what? People are not going to share their life stories with you, and they're not going to share the deep organizational pieces with you. Yes, they do. Because when they start to understand the structure and the wisdom of systemic work and constellations, they also begin to understand how they can use it to not just better themselves, but absolutely their companies. And so they learn to do things like dimensionalizing complex issues. And leaders, of course, begin to understand that when they tune into this, they are limitless leaders. They're also visionary leaders, because as long as they grow, their associates can grow too.
What are some of the less than desirable patterns common to businesses, and how do you coach them to affect change?
Gosh, there are quite a number. As above, so below. If there's something happening up at the top, you're going to see the symptom at the bottom. One of my favorites, the burdened position, where you have a position in a company that nobody can fill. What you look at is who occupied that originally, what happened to them, and what pattern was set off that now keeps echoing through the company so that nobody can fill that vacancy. In fact, they can't fill that position because it is still an occupied position because it hasn't been resolved. And so in that situation, what we'll do is we'll look at what was the event, who was the person, what did you take from that person, what did you give to that person, what did you take from that role, what did you receive from that role, can you give it its place and acknowledge it? Now it's vacant. But until you've done that, that hasn't been offboarded and it is not available to anybody else.
And to the same token, I've seen situations in businesses where someone is hired for a position and they don't last more than a month. And this keeps happening over and over again.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. You've got to go back to when did that first happen? And your chances are, you've just said something important. They don't last longer than a month. Who originally didn't last longer than a month? What happened? Because patterns are very specific and intricate. You will be floored by the details in which they replicate. And so, gone in a month, gone in a month, gone in a month. You better first figure out who was gone in a month, then we don't have to keep repeating that.
And what about managers and leaders who refuse to delegate and then complain when their workers are not performing?
Oh, you know why you're laughing, right? Because you've just, again, highlighted the caretaker. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. The problem is you're actually inherently saying to everybody else, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't. And you know what? They get the message loud and clear and they disappear. And so they'll say to me, don't get it. I'm really good to my people. I do half their work. That's half the problem.
And what about the culture of in companies where there seems to be a tremendous amount of gossip and backbiting?
What that is it originates in a fear of I am not safe. And so we all do it to see how much information we can accumulate and then what we can do with it politically. What you want to understand is, where did that originate? Are there, for example, two partners who are fighting and now everybody's taking sides, but they don't know it? Is this a family-owned business? And I've seen this with very big family-owned businesses where you have, for example, 4 siblings and one of the siblings is an outcast. And what you then see in the company is there are 3 darling areas in the company and the 4th area is just the black sheep. It doesn't matter what they do, it's not happening. And so what they're doing is they're forming unconscious loyalties to the family members they represent.
We have many listeners who own small, spiritually centered businesses, including yoga studios and healing practices. May the same methods used in larger corporations be applied to them?
Yes, they are to a large extent. That you want them to have a look at their own success and their patterns of success. And specifically, and I'm going to say they are guilty of, specifically spiritually owned businesses or small businesses, they are guilty of thinking that I should not charge too much for my services. Now, when they do that and they come and say, if it's spiritual, you shouldn't charge, I ask them then if they then presume that surgeons and lawyers and teachers are all heathens. Because no, they're not. And guess what? They charge good and well for their services. So never be afraid to charge your worth. And by the way, what you're charging reflects your worth.
Absolutely. And what a lot of them don't recognize, I've had friends in this position, is that everything, including money, as you said, have the relationship with money, everything is an exchange. And so consequently, if you're exchanging energy, energy is money. You should take that in exchange for payment.
Absolutely. And energy is money. And here's the deal. If you are not taking full exchange, what you're literally saying to somebody is, you know what, I'll take your appendix out for $10.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm not going to that guy.
Taking your wisdom and approach to a national scale and without specifically addressing party lines and divisions, are we as a nation patterning centuries of unaddressed emotional DNA? And if so, is there a way we can fix this?
Gosh, I want to tell you, this is not even just a national scale. This is a global scale. Yes, we are. If I look at it carefully, what I notice is there's a lot of individualism and a lot of me, and a lot of people who feel excluded. And then it's on all sides, right? It's not one or the other. It's on all fronts. What we've got to do to address it is literally to look at each other and say, I see you, I hear you. Tell me about you, with our mouths shut. And give the other a place in your system. Because when we can see you and we can hear you and we can give you a place and everyone has a place, then no one needs to fight for a place. And yes, I think we are bumping into very old ideologies. And instead of looking and saying there is a place for many, we're saying it's either mine or yours. No, a system never does that. There is place for all. There is wisdom in all. You can either fight for it or you can really become enriched from it.
And I think your key points there were start the conversation and then rather than yelling, listen, really hear what everyone's saying.
Everyone, and I mean everyone, because we want to demonize sides or genders or colors. You cannot do that. Every single side, color, gender has worth. And until you acknowledge the worth of every single one, people are going to fight because they feel fearful.
Absolutely. You're going to be offering emotional DNA and money DNA workshops in October. What are the dates and what may attendees look forward to?
So thank you for speaking about those. Yes, in October, emotional DNA is from the 6th through the 8th. And money DNA is from the 28th through the 31st. Now, the emotional DNA is online. And what it is it's all of the basic theories that you need to understand to be able to take who you are and begin working on who you want to be. To be able to look at your system and to be able to work within that system and to be able to then grow the system. This teaches you the nuts and bolts of that. And I wanted that one in particular to be before the money DNA, because if you understand that, then when you come to that one, which by the way is at Disney World in person, it means you already have a working knowledge of what systems are, and you can begin interacting with and working with constellations. And Victor, that's when you start to feel and experience the living energy of your system and how it's operating in you, through you, and for you, and how you can begin changing it up. Now, what we did was normally the emotional DNA has a cost and the money DNA has a cost. And we spoke for a long time and I said to the team, okay, people are coming out of a pandemic. We've got to be kind and encouraging. And so the emotional DNA is not even an eighth of its normal price, because I wanted people to be able to do both of those if they chose. And so if they go onto the website, they will see it's a combination bundle, and they'll see the substantial savings that then give them the money DNA one and the full understanding of what this work is.
And you're also offering a leadership workshop in December. Who is that geared toward?
Now, that's really geared towards anybody, because how are you a leader in your own system? Are you a mother? Are you a teacher? Are you an engineer? Are you a leader in a big company? There are leadership qualities in every one of us. It's called worth. Maybe it should have been called worth DNA, but it's what are you worth? How are you a leader in your own right? Where are you and are you not? And let's play with that a little bit so that the full leader comes out in you.
Wonderful. My guest is Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, please share with our listeners one more time your website.
Judy Wilkins-Smith.com.
And there they can register for your workshops. And what else may they find?
They can register for the workshops. They can read the blogs. They find contact information if they have a question for me. I'm always happy to answer. They will find out a little bit more about what the work means and how they can use it for their own benefit.
Judy, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom, your work, and your heart, because you have a great heart.
Thank you so much. You know, as you were saying a little bit earlier, it's lovely to be with friends that you know you've known for a long time.
Absolutely. True, so true and so felt. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.